Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for joining again after what was a really exciting day. We have more than 200 people who registered to attend today's conference and yesterday's conference, and then the conference that we're doing for families on Saturday from countries all over the world. And just really excited that you're all here to continue the conversation. Just a few announcements. So the recordings are up on the site. If you go to the agenda page, the recordings from yesterday. So thank you to Jeff and his tech team for getting those up. I know we've been asked about that. For those of you that are watching live stream, make sure that when you leave and come back, if you're not seeing anything on your screen who are in the live stream, just refresh your browser and it should restart from wherever you left off. And I want to just kick us off this morning with a recap of where we were yesterday and also talk about where we're going to be going. So, I think it's been really bittersweet for me as I've been processing everything that happened yesterday and all the discussions we've had leading up to this. Even while many of our families are suffering, are in the hospital, are dealing with daily seizures and injuries of their kids, we're seeing this in our support group. And it just makes it even more meaningful that all of you guys are here trying to help us to find some stability, some way of life, some help for our families who are constantly living in crisis. So let's jump in and recap a little bit. First, I want to thank our conference organizers. If I could get my screen to advance, let's see what's going to happen here. There we go. A lot of work went into this conference, and so many people have been saying, hey, wonderful speakers yesterday, great lineup. I really had very little to do with it. It was these people right here that did all of the work. And I just cannot thank them enough for being a part of this and coming in, really deciding how the sessions were going to flow and sort of making this crazy dream of pulling this meeting together a reality. It wasn't just them. If you are a organizer here, you get put to work as a moderator. So we had Dr. Meffer and Dr. Baduri moderated session 1 yesterday, and Dr. Marsh and Dr. Porter moderated session 2, and Dr. Baraban, of course, is moderating session 3 today. And we had a great discussion. I kicked us off yesterday talking about how none of the treatments that we have today for Lennox-Gastaut syndrome really have been transformative. And this was a theme that kept coming up over and over during the day. Dr. Worrell talked about it, Dr. Patel, Dr. Dlugos, Dr. Berg all talked about that as well. But Dr. Elaine Worrell kicked us off with a beautiful talk yesterday, which you can watch a recording of all the features of LGS and how it evolves and how it compares to other syndromes and changes with age. And that really set us up for Dr. Patel, who talked about the different causes of LGS. And why is it that you have all of these different causes, hundreds of different causes that all converge onto the same network, giving us the same EEG? Is it the same pathway? No. And then what do we need to know about the history of this evolution of LGS? Why do patients go LGS, as we talked about? And is there a way to prevent that? Dr. Berg gave a great talk on outcomes in LGS and what does better actually look like for our families? What are the appropriate measures? And she said so many powerful things, but one of them was they just started asking in their studies working with families like ours, can your child walk? Can they talk? Can they eat? Can they utter any sentences, any words, any noises at all, any sounds? And then she talked about how we can use those appropriate measures as they're being developed in the intended populations. Maybe we go broad, maybe we go narrow as we think about getting our families ready for clinical trials. And then Dr. Wheelis wrapped things up talking about treatments for LGS, what we have now, what's coming, and again, emphasizing that even though we have 6 FDA-approved treatments for LGS, not one of them has been transformative for a large number of people in our population. And what is the reason for that? Do we know? These are gaps in the space as we're trying to figure these out. And then that rolled over into a session on how we will advance or how we can think about advancing basic research as we look to understand the LGS network. A lot of conversation that we talked about pre-LGS, right? The evolution up to LGS. But as we think about LGS as a network disorder, how can we intervene? So Jurian Peters gave a wonderful talk on lesional network mapping and how you can use that to localize the structures that are critical for the features in any given epilepsy. So so maybe we can use that to look at tonic seizures and combine MRI and EEG to look at the persistence of these network features in those regions as we start to try to narrow down where in the brain, what are the structures that these networks are impacting. And then Jennifer Glenis also gave just a beautiful talk as she was looking at how interictal epileptic activity, so activity that happens between seizures, which is something that LGS is notorious for, can actually lead to pathological network overall, and how that can progress. This interictal activity can create foci on its own, and how stimulation might be something that we can do to try to help reverse what's going on in those networks, but also to think about improving seizure outcomes and memory dysfunction. John Archer gave a great talk that was very exciting, where he specifically was looking at the LGS network. And, we've known for a while that this theory that LGS is a secondary network disorder. And him and his team are honing in on the key cognitive systems that are persistently impacted across patients and those areas that are responsible for LGS. And it's potentially reversible in some cases, these network disorders. It obviously depends on when you intervene. And there may be an emerging role for the frontoparietal executive control network as a potential target. So all very tantalizing as we think about the gaps and where we might go in the future with the network. We pivoted a little bit with Dr. Grinspan's talk, where he talked about big data and how we can use that data to understand what's going on right now in LGS. Can we predict who's going to get it? Are there biomarkers that tell us who's going to get it? And when you have it, can we use those biomarkers to understand more about the natural history? Can we use that big data that exists already, these data sets, to look more broadly at the population and figure out where opportunities are for intervention? And looking at some of the data he has from his own lab and the work that he's been doing, identified several areas, 3 areas, I believe, that we could intervene potentially. Maybe we get aggressive when slow spike in waist shows up early on, or, even optimizing care for infantile spasms or identifying high-risk infants. These are all areas where we can think about efforts that will help to better the lives of people who are living with LGS or pre-LGS. And then Dr. DeLugos gave us a wonderful and sobering talk about clinical trials in LGS, the challenges and the opportunities. We're talking about who to include in those, or do we go broad, do we go narrow, thinking about the right kind of clinical trial setup, thinking about non-seizure outcomes, thinking about using the EEG in clinical trials and what that might entail. And this led to a wonderful discussion yesterday that was very exciting for all of us that were listening. And I'm excited to hear more today. Today, we're going to be looking at how can we advance the basic research network. And the big reason for this meeting, specifically in the way that it was set up, was to start thinking about what's possible as we looked forward to the future of LGS research. And so I'm really excited to hear from Allison Motri today, Megan Dennis and Bingshan Zhu. Scott Baraban, I'll be moderating this session as we really look into how we might understand the network and what's possible, and then also think about what the gaps are specifically in LGS. Just to kind of bring it home a little bit to what I talked about, we heard a lot in our talks yesterday about this hierarchy of needs in LGS. We heard about it directly from me, but also indirectly, where we learned about the issues, especially in session 1, that so many LGS families are facing. And we talked about how our families are really willing to absorb a lot of risk because we are constantly living in this crisis mode, and how a lot of the outcome measures that are out there don't exist to measure really where our loved ones are at. And so it was good to see that as it came across in all of the talks, especially in the first session. We often talked about this evolution and these intervention points. And so sort of going back to this slide that I've shown before, if you've got LGS already, right? So this is this population over here on the right side of my screen, you have LGS already. There's definitely work we can do to understand that population, understand that natural history, think about possible ways, maybe with brain stimulation, closed loop network stimulation or others, whether it's surface level or deep, to help combat the network defects. Maybe, we can reverse it in some ways or get back some of the control. And then, of course, there's ongoing treatments that are happening, trials that are being conducted and treatments being developed. We also talked a bit about intervening earlier at the treatment-resistant epilepsy stage. And so each of these dashes represented a point, as we had suspected, of where you can intervene. You can intervene at the infantile spasm stage, and we talked a lot about that, and target that specific area of the brain or the specific phenotype. And trials are underway there, research is going on there. We talked about targeting the early causes, especially the genetics of it, this whole concept of pre-LGS. And so it was really exciting to see this whole concept come together as we thought about how we might move science forward. The idea is that we're going to come out of this meeting with an RFA at some point, and we want to continue the conversation, but think about how we can drive research in this area as a foundation and bring funding in to do that. We've talked a little bit, internally at our organization about where research is being done across this entire landscape. So over here on the left side under basic research, each of these red names is the name of a grantee that we have funded. We funded a number of researchers to identify models of LGS. And I think that Jennifer Carney, who's been attending this meeting, I hope she's here today, has a really exciting potential model where we can start to move forward and understand in actual model systems, which we have not had previously, what's going on at a cellular molecular level. We also have a lot of drugs that are ongoing in trials, whether those drugs are specifically for LGS or something related to pre-LGS, and I don't even think they're all listed here. We have a number of FDA-approved drugs, including drugs that are approved for cluster seizures and status epilepticus, which our families regularly experience. And then we've also funded over here on the evidence-based pyramid level, where we've, funded some of the work that was done by Aaron Warren in John Archer's lab. We funded some cohort studies, prospective exposure studies from Dan Schrey, Elizabeth Thiel, and Candace Myers. Dan Schrey specifically has been looking at the evolution of the EEG from, TS to IS to LGS, which is exciting. And we've looked at some work looking at case control studies and retrospective. So we are funding across this area, but we're really trying to figure out where the money that we work, tirelessly to raise could really go to move the needle. And that's really what today's discussion is going to be about in session 4. Where are the gaps? Where can we make an impact? What are they? Where is the most excitement as we think about moving forward? And as we think about those gaps, and I just want to point out, and as I wrap up with my last couple of slides, how we're going to continue the conversation. There's the gaps in research, but this will also be weighed against what's most important to families. Families have come up with their own gaps, right? Their own idea of what's most important. And I think it's really important for us as we build this patient researcher network that we all work together to identify what's most important to patients, not just what can be done, but what should be done first in order of priority. And so we began to identify gaps, that our patients are letting us know about. Just a few of them highlighted in red here. We don't know which treatment is best. We're not learning from every patient. There's no disease-modifying therapies. Of course, this is years and years of work we've laid out ahead of us, but we are here for the long haul. I'm now on year 26 or 27 of our LGS journey, and we're just pissed off enough to keep this going and want to make it better for the next generation of people who are living with this horrible, horrible disease. On that note, keeping the conversation going, this coming Saturday is our family day as part of this meeting of the minds. This will be live streamed. You can log back onto the Family Day site and watch as I try to summarize to our families what we learned today, and then enter into a discussion about what they think is most important and what a disease-modifying therapy looks like to them. We're also going to have a webinar next week. I guess we're calling this one Ask Tracy. Wow, okay. Come and ask me things. This is really going to be around this meeting of the minds, and if there was anything that you wanted to further discuss, it's mostly for families, but anyone was welcome to join. We're looking to put out an RFA. Usually we put out we're revamping our grants program this year. We're going to be working with a new medical science advisory board as we do this. And we usually put out our request for applications at AES in December. And then the award, the program usually opens in February of the year. So we hope that some of you guys listening will apply and tell other people to apply. We will be kicking off our mom seminar series on December 3rd at the American Epilepsy Society meeting. Dennis DeLugos will be leading another conversation about current clinical trials in LGS. So we're very excited about that. And then to kick off to finish and wrap up the rest of the year, we'll be having our AES Research Roundtable also on December 3rd at AES in Chicago this year. And our grantees will be speaking about the work that they have specifically done for the LGS Foundation. All of this, I just cannot thank this team. We are a small but mighty team of mothers, and our board is mothers and fathers and friends who are committed to making the future brighter for those that are living with LGS. This team has been through the ringer. They have worked really hard this year, and I am just so humbled and honored to work with all of you wonderful ladies. And then finally, I just want to say thank you again to everybody that made this possible. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative has really worked so hard to help us understand how to raise money and how to convene meetings like this and bring researchers together, to bring the patient voice into it, how to work with donors, how to be good community partners, all of these things to build our capacity as an organization and make us better and stronger. And we are so grateful to them and are really hopeful for the future. It looks really bright. And then, of course, the sponsors for this meeting, you guys have been incredible. We would not be here without you. So thank you.